and do not necessarily represent those of station staff, management, and advertisers.
All right, looks like we're ready to go here, locked and loaded on another episode of the Delivering Sports Show. I'm starting off, I like to play classic songs when I start the show, by the way. I've gone to 2K11, I've gone to NFL Street, and I'm having Kevin on today, and I asked him, give me one, give me something good here. And he went with none other than Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Big fan of that game, obviously, very nostalgic, so that's what we started off with today. But what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Spencer, aka Spencer the Wiz for my sports name. But we're here another Friday, and we got lots to talk about. Oh my gosh, this has been such a busy week. Basketball is really ramping up, and what we're going to be talking about today. I got the Nets, obviously, the big trade that I talked about last week. Well, how are they playing on the court? We'll talk about that in just a moment. 76ers are playing okay, but they seem to have a lot of deficiencies, but I don't see the reason why they can't go far. We'll also talk about that. NBA has some big COVID issues, and there's a particular player who has issues with the protocols. So an interesting topic there. We're going to talk about the New York Knicks, of course. Why not? They're actually 8-8 right now, so pretty interesting storyline going through. Lakers and Bucks played, and we got some NFL games. So we're just going to kind of go all the way through it, and that's will help me introduce none other than Kevin Kelly, who I'm bringing on the screen right now. How are you doing there, pal?
I'm great, man. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. So we're going to start with none other than the Brooklyn Nets, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, just lost for the second time to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, we can talk about the first game. The heroics of Colin Sexton has a pretty, special performance, all things considered. But today they just straight up lost. They didn't have Kevin Durant. So we'll talk about this game just in itself. What do you make of the new look Nets so far in the season?
We talked about this like on one of the first times I was on the show, in that if it happens, there's no talent, like there's no team you can assemble talent-wise that I would take over them. The issue is that you have three guys who think they are, in essence, Batman, when debatably maybe none of them are. So that's where they're at right now, and obviously they're going to start playing better at some point. They've introduced a massive change in the dynamic of how their team works, so it's obviously going to take time to, for everyone to try and get on the same page. But I don't see it, like them fixing the potential issue down the road of all of those egos clashing.
It's not scoring that I'm worried about.
Egos in the NBA.
For sure. And it's not, how they always say there's only one ball, and that's always the argument whenever super teams are created. I think they're going to be scoring just fine. I think they scored over 120 again today, if not something close to there like they did the last time. It's defensively. Colin Sexton ate again. I think anytime they play a guard-heavy team, i.e. the Golden State Warriors or the Portland Trailblazers, I know that's in the West, so we can take it to the East as well. I think Boston they're going to have a really hard time with Jaylen Brown. You can go to the Miami Heat with Duncan Robinson. So do you see them fixing it defensively, or they just literally don't have the talent? James Harden and Kyrie are not ball stoppers, and for anyone's definition of those two things.
Yeah, they're definitely not defensive stoppers on that side of the ball, but definitely more so on the offensive side. They're just going to have to outscore everybody. And they have a pretty decent chance to be able to do that, given that they have two of probably the two best scorers in the NBA. But they're going to have to essentially do a balls to the wall every single week. Like someone's got to be in the upper 30s or 40s for them to be able to win consistently.
Yeah, and that's not a good thing when you're talking about going into the playoffs. I don't think they're going to be able to turn on a switch because Kyrie and James Harden don't have the fundamentals defensively to make those big steps forward. So, we'll go ahead and project now from what you've seen. Where do you see them landing in the playoffs, and how far can they go in the playoffs, given that the East is literally weaker than the West? We know that. So do you think rookie head coach Steve Nash can take them to the finals?
Definitely. I definitely think the East is not an easy conference to win in, but there's definitely situations in which the circumstances can line up for a team to have maybe an easier path to the finals, or like, take a path of less resistance than usually you would have. Obviously, because obviously Miami was the team that ended up winning the East and making it to the NBA Finals, but we're not all sure that they were the best team in that conference last year. We all kind of understand that they had like this kind of like miracle run going in them, and they just eventually ran out of gas in the finals. But I think we can all agree that like it's still like the path to the NBA Finals in the Eastern Conference is not as it's not as daunting as over in the West.
No, certainly not. And we'll finish up this little Brooklyn conversation with who takes the final shot come playoff time. Is it just whoever ends up getting the ball out of bounds, or do they call a play for somebody?
I think James. I don't really think it matters too much, but I think James Harden should always be third on the list, regardless of whether you want to give it to Durant or Kyrie. But you should not be giving it to James Harden first. I would much rather give it to either of those two guys first.
Well, if the first two games are anything to go by, and of course, things are going to change throughout the season, so it's not the end all be all, of course. But so the final two shots in regulation to go for the win situations, Kyrie had one, KD had the other. Kevin Durant did not touch the ball. At the end of the first overtime, KD had a chance, and they gave it to him. So it's inconclusive. I guess the real answer is it doesn't matter. They did only draw up one play for Kevin Durant, which I think is objectively the wrong choice. I think he should always have the ball in the late to go, because they're not going to double team him. It's impossible when you have all three of those guys on the court. I mean, that's why they're so good. So he's going to have the chance to score one-on-one, and I'd always rather have Kevin Durant take that shot. Although you can make the argument for Kyrie, being that he did make the biggest shot in finals history pretty much. But Kevin Durant also has made a lot of just dagger threes, especially the three over LeBron James. So I guess in conclusion, we'll have to wait and see with the Nets. It looks pretty bad right now. I mean, they dropped 2 to the Cavs when everyone's there, but of course they're new. We're talking about a new head coach. They'll get into the swing of things. If anything, I like them a lot more next year, although they're still just going to have problems defensively. Look, they're paying most of these guys max money. So
they don't have any money.
Yeah, they're not going. It's not like in the offseason they're going to be able to assemble these new guys. Mm-hmm. I think the age of veteran minimums are just kind of over. The Golden State Warriors did that for a few years. Guys are about their money now. It's very important in the league, and guys are getting overpaid all the time. I don't expect any league minimums to go around, especially for 3 guys who are not locker room people. Let's keep that in mind. I mean, they all want to be the leader, but they're not actual leaders in the locker room. Kyrie thought he could be, and then all the young players for the Celtics hated him because he just wasn't a leader.
Saw how that went in Boston, yeah.
Then we saw how James Harden crashed and burned with his finale with the Houston Rockets. And then Kevin Durant, of course, kind of went behind everyone's back and felt a little disrespected when everyone knew that Steph Curry was always the leader of that team.
Mm-hmm.
So
in Golden State, yeah.
Yeah. So they're going to have yeah. Mm-hmm.
My final word on this will just be Steve Nash is probably way in over his head on this. He did not sign up he did not sign up to coach 2 former MVPs.
And it was it was a terrible signing, in my opinion. They should have never have signed him, especially when you have a guy like Kyrie saying that he's not actually the head coach. Very bad look. So especially when it comes to playoff time. I don't know what coach. I mean, Tom Thibodeau probably would have been the correct coach hiring for them, if you want my opinion. And we're going to talk about that later.
For the Nets.
They need someone to humble themselves, because all of them think that they're all above themselves. James Harden got caught with a little baby in the club. Kyrie was out in the clubbing. Kevin Durant, of course, is the only exception. He's just he's just a dork. I don't know. He's not a leader of a team.
Kevin Durant just be up in the crib, man.
But his number one priority is basketball, to his credit. So it doesn't translate in the locker room. Guys just don't look up to him. They kind of just enjoy his competitive nature. A very unique player. I don't think I've ever seen a player that his number one priority is basketball and they weren't a good leader. So
he just wants to hoop, man. That's all he wants to do.
He does. So I got respect for that too, of course. I mean, anybody who can do that is good in my book. But let's take this over to the 76ers, who, I don't know, they're 7-5 at the current moment, and a lot of the losses came from complications of COVID-19. So when they're fully healthy, they've been cleaning house for the most part. They've been fairly successful. And the big story this season has been Ben Simmons' refusal to take the next step. He's still good at rebounding. He's still good at ball facilitating. He's great on defense. Essentially everything but score. So when does it get to the point that you have to trade him, or do you just not, because of how effective he is at literally everything else?
It is the biggest kind of like paradoxical quandary in the NBA right now. Ben Simmons was the like absolute consensus like first round pick the year he came out of college at LSU. And now like and he showed that, you know, pretty much from the moment he stepped on a court. He obviously missed his first season, but from the moment he was actually playing on a consistent basis, he showed exactly why he was the first overall pick. The issue is that nothing has happened since then. Nothing new has happened with Ben Simmons since then. And it's a shame because, like you were saying at the very beginning, they're playing pretty well right now when they do get to play. Doc Rivers, like with Doc Rivers and their roster and everything they have going for them right now, roster, like as far as just all of the things you can kind of the amalgamation of everything in an NBA team, combination of talent, coaching, play styles, all of that stuff, like just where guys are at in their careers. There's not a team that you want, like there's not a team that has it more well put together than the Sixers right now. So it is, a lot of it is dependent on Ben Simmons fleshing out his game to a point where, like, obviously because he hasn't done it yet, so they're waiting on him. It really is on him. All of the championship aspirations, it hinges on his ability to take it to the next level, develop that jumper, and become more of a scoring minded player, having that be more of a threat in his game.
What do they need out of him? Because we're also going to talk about Giannis in a bit, so they're kind of parallel in my mind in that one's trying to shoot the three and being unsuccessful, but he's just straight up not doing it. Does it have to be 3-pointers? What if it was just like a mid-range game? Would that change things for the 76ers? Or does he have to extend all the way out? What kind of offensive game do they need him to have to make the next step forward? Because they were very close to the finals. Let's keep in mind, I mean, they were a bounce away from Kawhi Leonard's lucky bounce from being there. So what did the 76ers need out of him to move forward?
They simply just need Ben Simmons to be respected as a scorer. I don't think anyone respects Ben Simmons' scoring ability at any of the three levels of the court. He's obviously he's gonna, if he gets that close to the rim, he's probably gonna be able to make those shots. Like his career field goal percentage is close to 50 or in the 50s. So obviously that's an element of his game, but it's a very easy part to address if you're an NBA defense. And so the fact that no one respects any mid-range guys, the fact that in the entire world knows that he's not going to shoot a three, especially if he's not absolutely wide open. And so just the sheer fact that defenses do not like have to really prioritize stopping Ben Simmons from scoring the ball, they know that scoring is not a priority to him. Like we've shown that he's put up donuts in playoff games. Scoring is not at the top of the list for Ben Simmons, and that's okay. But they also need that from, like, that's okay as a basketball player for scoring not to be your strong suit. But when you're the first overall pick and you are like this team's kind of franchise guy, like the process was not complete until Ben Simmons started playing. And so if you are that guy, you have to expand your game. There can't be people just Statue of Liberty frozen when you are at the 3-point line, not scared at all that you're going to jack up a shot and make it. That can't happen.
No, it absolutely can. And I don't even think his free throws are actually all that successful either, which is horrible. If you're going to be bad at everything, you might as well be good at free throws as well. Because at the very least, he gets out on transition on a very consistent basis. In my opinion, he's got to have at least a DeMar DeRozan level, Amari Stoudemire level confidence from the mid-range. The 3-point line is a little overrated right now, in my opinion. Bigs dominated the playoffs last year, and he basically is a big. For the most part, he is a big. He's very much a Magic Johnson level. And we know Magic Johnson didn't live from the perimeter. A lot of the times he was in the post. And I think he also needs to develop that. And at least when Joel Embiid's off the floor, he should be the one clogging up the paint, because point guards right now are a little undersized. It's very much not a point forward league outside of LeBron James. And he's not even playing point guard anymore like he was a couple seasons ago and even last year. But his teammate, on the other hand, to go on with the 76ers, Joel Embiid's having an MVP level season. I don't know if he's going to win it, but he's going to be in the top 5 voting at the very least by the end of the season, as long as he stays healthy, which is easier said than done. But I'm going to go full Vegas on you. Are you folding, as in you don't buy this? You're checking, as in you're going to wait and see? Or are you going all in on him being a league MVP this year?
Do I think he will actually win it? Like, are you asking me to go in all in on the idea?
Well, either you're going to check up on it later, or you're folding. You don't buy it at all. Or you're all in and you're like, yeah, he's definitely going to win it. You're going to be the first guy to call it.
I'll check back later because Joel Embiid's biggest weakness is just being able to do stuff for a long time. So he's putting up 26, 11, and a couple blocks. How many blocks? A few blocks per game right now, 1.4. And I don't. I think he needs to be scoring more. If we're being completely honest right now, because especially if Ben Simmons is going to put up 12 points per game, if we want Joel Embiid to be seriously considered in the MVP race, he needs to pump it up to around like 27 to 30 points a game.
I'm folding, by the way. I actually
You're out on
I'm
that.
putting
You're
the
not even with
question.
it.
He
I can
hasn't
see
had
it.
he hasn't had a fully healthy season. So why should I expect for him to have one now? Nothing's changed. And it's not like he has dedicated his entire craft to basketball. He is very naturally talented. He has worked on his game, but it's not the most important thing in his life. That's something that separates the greatest players from the not so great players.
The issue is just that his I don't want to say his physical conditioning, but his stamina is just not where it was like his rookie year or like his second year in the league. Like
Uh,
one of Joel Embiid's biggest strong suits as a player was like he's huge. He is a massive. He's almost 300 pounds, but he could move really quickly, like around the court, especially on defense. He was a really good perimeter defender for a guy his size, and that's just not there. Really, he's just kind of using his strength and his weight and his height, and not really any of that athleticism that made him kind of like a standout big man in the NBA.
I'm telling you right now, last year I saw something I have never in my life once seen from an NBA player. I looked around. I was watching the game by myself, unfortunately, so no one could verify this with me. But they were playing in the playoffs against the Celtics. There was a possession where he had his hands on his hips, not guarding, like actively guarding. He was physically, like you could see the exhaustion. I'm sure there are players who have been as exhausted as he has on the court, but I've never seen it physically manifest where you just know he is not in the possession at all, looking to do anything. It was so bad.
He is gassed.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about him, but he seems to care more about his game than he does conditioning, which is another unique circumstance. So let's go back to the 76ers holistically. What are their realistic expectations in the playoffs this year? Knowing as long as Ben Simmons is healthy, I know we just criticize him, but he's still a very effective basketball player. They've been there before, technically. What can they do in the playoffs, and what chance do they have to go to the finals?
I just don't see anything different with them, like on a level that would make me reconsider their past. Just the past few years, the past few experiences that they've had in the playoffs against teams like the Raptors and the Celtics. They have not changed enough in this past offseason to make me think that any series against those kinds of teams, not the Raptors obviously at this point, but like the Bucks and the 76ers, like we were talking about, and the Celtics even too, or the Celtics and the Bucks. Those are definitely like teams I would consider before the Sixers at this point.
I'm not buying the Bucks, but before we go into all that, I want to talk about some NBA COVID issues. We'll just break it up and then we'll go to back to NBA games. So game after game is being canceled or postponed, as they're calling it. But I don't see any plans for them to make them up anytime soon. But anyways, what are they going to do to get this thing back on track? I mean, when you see these every game, the Grizzlies just canceled 3 of them. What are they going to do, first of all, about these cancel games? What is the solution to you? Because they don't have a plan right now.
I don't understand why it's such a big deal to just like pause the season for a week and figure out how we can make these changes. Week, 2 weeks to figure it all out. I don't like you and I talked about it a couple months ago. We didn't even like the initial plan. We didn't even like the initial plan for the NBA to come back because we knew this exact thing would happen. We knew this exact thing would happen. These guys would still be traveling to these still big market cities to where there's still a lot of trouble to get into, and they are doing that. And obviously it's not being like the whole idea of just staying COVID safe and quarantining and trying to avoid needless exposure has not worked so far, based on the number of games that we've had to see be postponed and even maybe even canceled. And so there's just like, you can't really track the current trajectory here. Like there's no kind of like outcome that you can really kind of realistically land at the way things are going right now. That's why I think they should just pause the season to figure everything out.
I think they're okay as of right now. I don't think they have to pause the season, but they should make up these games, and I don't think they have to like cram them at the end. There's an all-star break, and you're not playing an all-star game this season, meaning like you can make up there's probably like mini series they can do. Why not just
chance for Adam Silver's big tournament that he has been
yeah,
pushing
so
for?
there's not every team has had COVID issues. Not every team has had cancellations. The majority of the season is still going on. It's about 2 games a day now that are being canceled. But today, man, there was like 10 games or something like that. So why not have all the teams that have to make up their games? Because the season has been broken down in the first half and the second half, meaning they have not scheduled the second half of the season just quite yet. Take 2 weeks for all I care, because the Wizards are way behind. They've had tons and tons of issues. So what you should do is you get those teams, you let them play the games, you let them figure it out, and then if there's any of the other teams left, you can play a little cup, have a little mid-season tournament or not. Just let them have a break, because technically the teams that have COVID-19 are having the extra days off. Not everybody on the team has had COVID, so I think it's okay for you to just take 2 weeks out of because you haven't planned for the NBA Finals, you haven't planned for the playoffs. So why not get these games so everyone's caught up at the middle of the season, and then you tackle the second season with all those cancellations before the playoffs start. If they're playoff implications, if they have no playoff implications, the games don't matter, then don't play them. Who cares? The NFL
they didn't even let the Knicks go to the bubble. Like even like though they were kind of like on the fringe for the 8th. Like a lot of teams that were on the fringe for the 8th seed in their respective conferences didn't even get to go to the bubble. So it's just like, if these games aren't consequential, why play them? Why risk the exposure?
Yeah, exactly. And if you are going to go into the playoffs and there's still all these cancellations in the second half, like there were the first one, well, that's fine. You can also just have an extended playoff tournament like they did last year. It was a good system. It worked. And I don't see any problem with them doing it now. But don't get too far behind going into the second half of the season with all these games. Just do it now. Everybody's on the same playing field, and then you can tackle the second half.
Do you think we could avoid a lot of these daily cancellations if they just expanded the rosters? Because it's a more of a matter of just like they have to keep. It's not even that guys have COVID. It's just that they have to be kept out for these games just to complete a thorough contact tracing to just make sure that they have contained, like if there is an outbreak on a team, that they have it contained. So I think one of the best, like that's the only reason these guys are sitting out and these teams don't have enough players to play games. So I think by just simply expanding these rosters, 2-3 spots, I think you could solve a lot of these issues that we're having with game postponements.
Yeah, a lot of them you could. The Wizards are basically the only exception as far as I'm concerned. They've had 11 players test positive at the same time, so it's all out. Obviously one of the players had it during practice, and they just basketball is a very physical sport. Okay, it's 5-on-5. The bench guys are playing with starters. Everybody's touching. It's not like the NFL where you have a QB room, a running back room, a tight end room, offensive linemen who are like kind of not touching each other
all the time. Yeah,
very separate. Plus, you're wearing pads and stuff, so there's an extra layer of protection, I guess, if you will. A much less chance when guys are sweating on each other directly. There's no way. If one guy gets it and takes it to practice, everyone's going to get it. So let's talk about some of the new implications, because obviously they all met when the game started to, start getting postponed. They went back to the drawing board and they made these extra rules. So I'm going to read them out right now, and we'll talk about a player's comments on those rules in just a moment when I'm done. I don't know if you know who it is. So while I read this, I'll let you maybe try to guess the name of the player. So this is new rules. Game day. Players are prohibited from arriving at the arena more than 3 hours before tip-off. During the pre- and post-game periods, players must limit interactions to elbow and fist bumps, avoid extended socializing, and maintain 6 feet of distance as much as possible. Face masks. All players must wear face masks on the bench at all times. Upon exiting the game and prior to returning to the bench, players can sit in cool-down chairs arranged at least 12 feet apart, and the chairs 6 feet apart where face masks are not required. All right, I'll go to testing. Any individual who regularly visits the interior of a home of a player or team staff member for a professional purpose must undergo COVID-19 testing twice per week. For any team with a positive player case or a high-risk staff member case, the NBA may require players and team staff to undergo 5 consecutive days of twice per day lab-based testing in addition to the daily point of care testing. We'll do one more here. Meetings. For at least the next 2 weeks, any pregame meeting in the locker room is limited to no more than 10 minutes in duration, and all attendees must wear a face mask. All other meetings involving players and team staff members must continue to occur on the court. So Obviously, these are some pretty strict guidelines, but I don't think any of these are like really oppressive or like really ruins the experience for players or coaches or staff. Those rules are pretty reasonable. If not, some of them may seem a little silly, but none of them are crazy.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you're gonna say just like, they seem kind of like tedious and not really like they're more symbolic in that they're trying to enforce the practices that help prevent the spread of COVID, which is kind of like what everyone should be doing, but that's another discussion. I don't think, there's not really anything to be like, oh, this will really limit how we can perform or play. Like we probably shouldn't even be doing this in the first place, dude. So like if this is like objectively, it's probably not a good idea to be playing travel basketball right now, right?
Yeah, I think they should be playing series too, like hockey, by the way, where you play 4-game series against the same team. Hockey's kind of figured it out. Give them all the credit in the world for that. Now, they just started their season, so there probably will be issues, and I think one team already did. But for the most part, they're limiting traveling. There's still some fans in stadiums, and they're social distancing, of course. I don't think like having 2,000 fans and 14,000 seats is like a horrible thing at all, as long as they keep it safe. I think it's very reasonable. So the NHL has it figured out, and the NBA is kind of scrambling here.
I agree. I didn't really understand where they were coming from and how kind of lackadaisical their approach was to this entire thing, because it doesn't really seem like much is being done on a fundamental level to kind of change and address how COVID is affecting all of this, because it obviously is.
Yeah, right. So the one player that I had mentioned earlier, that player was George Hill. He said,
what did George Hill have to say?
So this is what his quote was. "We want to play the game, but I don't understand some of the rules," Hill said, following Tuesday's 112-102 loss to San Antonio Spurs. "We can sweat 48 minutes with the guy next to us for 48 minutes. That's a weird statement by him, but we can't talk to them afterward. It makes no sense." So yes, do all of them make perfectly good sense, and they all...
Not everything is going to be rationalized in every imaginable context. You cannot like make a rationalization for every rule that exists everywhere, because there's always going to be a little hole you can poke in it. It's obviously like, why we can't do that. Why. It's just to make sure that any unnecessary risk is not being taken. I don't understand why that's such a hard concept for George Hill to wrap his head around. Like, I haven't been able to hoop in like a year. Like, you don't think that makes me mad? Like, I just don't so as far as you still, like, I hate to be that guy, but as far as you still being able to play and you still being able to earn like millions and millions of dollars, like, I feel like you can live without dapping up LeBron when you see him. Like, it's you're gonna be fine. Like, it'll be all right.
Yeah, and let me remind everybody, he makes $9 million a year, in case you feel sorry for him. And the fact that he has to make a few extra sacrifices, like he can't have people come up to his room, I do not feel any sympathy for.
Dude, people have made, like, the sacrifices that people have had to make to continue to work during COVID far outweigh people not being able to give high fives on the court. It's just, I don't want to be the guy who's like, shut up rich athlete or anything like that.
I'll do it. I'll take the fall for you on that one. Shut up, rich athlete. I'll say it right now.
I just like, I can't vibe with the whole idea that you feel like your experience from being able to earn millions of dollars during a pandemic while people are starving is just, I have a hard time feeling bad. I honestly do.
It seems like he wants to be the forefront of a lot of things, and he just never knows how to follow through with them.
Dude. Yeah. It's a noble thing to, like, I don't think that questioning COVID guidelines is a noble thing, but it was a noble thing for him to be like, you know what? There's too much going on in the world right now. We shouldn't be playing this playoff game while, the George Floyd stuff is happening right now. So but he didn't think it through, man. They just like, all right, are we striking now? Like,
they're like, "Oh, dude, that's awesome. We love what you're saying. What's your plan?" He goes, "Plan?
We're just gonna sit the game out, and then we're gonna go play. We're gonna go play next week."
Yeah, 3 days, right? And then 3 days to silence. That's gonna change everything. It's unbelievable. So, no, not on the Delivering Sports Show do we endorse George Hill's plight, unfortunately. But going back to fun basketball, and it's actually been kind of fun this year, is the New York Knicks. Here we go. They're sitting in
Friday Night Knicks, baby.
Yeah, they're 8-8 right now. So as it currently stands, riding a 3-game winning streak. First of all, I'm going to check up on Frank Ntilikina and Dennis Smith Jr. What's going on with those two? I do not see them, and I just commentated the game.
They do not play, dude. They don't play at all. I think Dennis is just racking up DNP CDs, but I think Ntilikina has been hurt. Like Dennis only plays garbage time minutes now. Like he's effectively fallen completely out of the rotation. It's pretty much over. The Dennis Smith Jr. experiment in New York City is over, which is an absolute shame because he was like the key material asset in the Porzingis trade, and he is not going to be on the team next year, which is very sad.
What happened to him? What do you, in your honest opinion, what do you think happened to him?
I just think the pressure got to him. I think the pressure of just being a lottery pick, especially and then you have a lot of expectations coming in, and then he's just like, he didn't have the best situation around him, but also like, I do think he lost a lot of enthusiasm to, be a great basketball player. Like his body language was just really bad last season at pretty much every point, especially in the throws, like the latter half of the season before COVID shut the season down. But I don't think he just don't have that fire in him.
Maybe he lost the passion for basketball, and we'll talk about another position
they've talked about it a bit with him too. It's just like the pressure of like living in New York and the expectations. Like you talked about like people like Uber drivers like talking about how bad the team is and stuff like that directly to his face, and it's just like maybe he just needs to get out of there. I don't know if a second change of scenery ever did a guy well, but his prosperity will not find him in New York City.
Sometimes some guys are just not meant to prosper in New York, and this guy I'm hoping will prosper. They're kind of my favorite team in the East too. I keep up with them, obviously, is Obi Toppin. There's only one issue. It's not that he's been playing bad necessarily. When he's come in, he's been pretty effective for the most part. But they just happen to have a guy who's having, I don't know, an all-star season, in Julius Randle, who they should have fully expected to have an all-star season. What are they going to do with Obi Toppin?
So I was not super on board with the Obi Toppin pick. I quickly rationalized it, obviously, because I like to enjoy watching my team play basketball, and thankfully they have given me a lot of enjoyable basketball to watch so far. But the Obi the pick still perplexes me. I just don't really like, because obviously it doesn't seem like there is a huge rush to offload Julius Randle. Especially not now, because he's playing legitimately at an all-star level at the current moment. And so, like, what's the long-term plan here? Because Randle at the point has gone through a complete metamorphosis as a player, in my opinion. Like when I watch him and I see like it's not even at a point where the Knicks have lost 8 games this year. Those losses, it's not even Randle that like it's Randle still like contributing on a level that is like, oh, okay, so he did his part, and you can easily identify the other aspects of the game that the Knicks are lacking in. But what do you do about Obi Toppin? Like he's the 8th overall pick, and he plays the exact same position, kind of plays the exact same role that Julius Randle is absolutely thriving in right now.
Well, I think the greatest thing that Tom Thibodeau has done is not give the ball to Julius Randle at the top of the 3-point arc, because we know the only thing he knows to do at the top of the 3-point arc is put his head down and miss a basket driving through the lane. He's getting the ball more at the elbow. He's getting it on the low block, and at least getting it on the wings where he is like setting up some sort of offensive possession. So Tom Thibodeau has very much in that sense helped his career. We know he's been successful, in the past. It's just under the Knicks, he just was not put in the best position, but he's legitimately playing like an all-star. He will make an all-star game this year. They're not going to play it, but he will be selected at the end of the day. So do they accept a first-round draft pick for Julius Randle and think that's a success? Or is Julius Randle going to have to find his way to stay on the team?
I legitimately don't know at this point, because what Julius Randle is, he's like in his early 20s too. I believe, yeah, he's 26 years old. He's only 26.
Yeah.
Like, he's not like he's old. You can give him another contract. And if he, like, God forbid, like, obviously I don't think this is what's going to happen, but God forbid he leads the Knicks to the playoffs or something. Like, what do you do then?
I don't know. I did.
He either turns into the hottest trade commodity in the NBA, or you just like, okay, it's the RJ Barrett, Julius Randle show now. Like, and I don't know where that leaves Obi Toppin. I think it could have just been a lot easier for all of this to happen because very clearly Tibbs had plans for Julius Randle. It would have just been a lot easier if you just didn't take Obi Toppin. You just took a guy like Tyrese Halliburton. With the emergence of Emmanuel quickly, I don't have a hard time saying that Tyrese Halliburton could do the same thing in New York. Probably better.
And start. He would definitely be starting. But we want to talk about RJ Barrett actually for a second. So he's supposed to be the leader of the team. The problem is he can't seem to play consistently this year. That's the biggest issue. So are you buying the idea that he can either be a starter on a championship team, the second best player, the third best? Where does RJ Barrett place in the future of the Knicks?
I think it's really hard to tell still. I've tried to be as pragmatic as possible with RJ Barrett, and that means like also being realistic. I did think he could be like that, like a second or third best player on a championship team at his like very peak. If everything went that way and everything went well, I thought that's the kind of player he could end up being. There's been a lot to kind of dissuade me from like the real, like how realistic that potential outcome is. But like I watch him very closely, and I know what he's bad at, and I know when he like I can notice when he's making efforts to try and like to improve on those things, and he does. Like the thing with like the biggest thing for me this year was that he just could not hit a free throw. He got to the line all the time last year. He was really, really good at drawing fouls, could not hit a free throw. And he's hit all his free throws like really well. And so I think for a 20-year-old kid who is like improving pretty much like every time he gets an extended break, he is able to kind of assess what the holes in his game are and come back and at least mildly improve, because all of his numbers are up this year. You know, and the last 4 games, he has largely turned it around and started churning out more consistent performances. So I don't feel comfortable kind of putting a stamp on him at 20, like at this point still, because I still think that there's a lot of developing one way or another for him.
It's confidence for me a little bit too. I don't think he's as confident in his offensive game. I love RJ Barrett. I'll be honest with you. I'd love to have him on my basketball team. The kid's extremely athletic. I think he's much more akin to Dwayne Wade. I still hold on to that belief. Even maybe like a playmaking version of Dwayne Wade to a certain extent. And if he would just drive to the lane a little bit more. But the one play that I'll point to was in the Brooklyn Nets game. It was him on the wing, and then to the right of him in the corner was Austin Rivers, who was wide open, mind you, but they pass out to him and he hesitates. Either you pass that ball immediately or you take that shot, but when the opposing defense sees you even think about it for a second, they know in the back of your mind, all right, let's let this kid shoot threes because he ain't making them.
I think a lot of it has to do with I hate to like sound like I'm making excuses, but David Fizdale was legitimately probably the worst person to put around RJ Barrett in his rookie year. It was the worst. David Fizdale was the worst person to put around a lot of the players who were on the Knicks last season. Absolutely the worst person to have around Julius Randle because there was zero accountability last season. And I think the zero accountability thing kind of trickled down. It let RJ kind of not develop some bad habits, but engage in some potentially bad habits down the road. Tibbs has come in, and obviously Tibbs is like the biggest authoritarian in the NBA. And so if you go from the exact polar opposite from zero accountability to probably the most accountability you'll ever get from a coach, right? And so that's a pretty tough kind of adjustment to make. And I think we're seeing him kind of iron out those creases right now, because he has been playing. Last 10 has largely improved his numbers.
All right, Kevin, it's time, and I'm going to play a little music underneath you for maybe a little bit of motivation. I think you know this.
Don't ask me this question. I know what you're asking.
Are you folding, checking, or going all in on the New York Knicks to make the playoffs this year?
Don't play the music, man.
Come on, I'm trying to hype you up.
I gotta fold, man. They just I don't see the long term. I do see that, like, this happens a lot. You know this happens. Too, where they kind of like they start hot or they have kind of like this like they show potential, and then after the new year, I think that we're starting on a delayed season this year. It's just and it's gonna happen hard.
It's just, I'm just telling you right now, hearing that music underneath you while you say this is just killing me right now. I'll kill the music because I'm gonna start laughing.
Let me explain to you why our anthem plays, why we aren't making the playoffs.
I'm checking because, and I'm very close to going all in on this. I like Tom Thibodeau as coach. He's gonna burn these players to the ground, and we've already seen that in certain stints where they play a lot of games in short amounts. He does not care. Tom Thibodeau, he will play the starters 40-ish minutes a game when he probably shouldn't be. So it's to their detriment, but sometimes it's to the benefit because when you have your starters in more, you're going to win more games. And I guess it's not, dude, they actually have a pretty deep team, or at least a deep list of players that can play in. Kevin Knox is the best game of his. He's having the best season of his career right now, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's just a thing of just like they're sitting at the 8th seed right now at 8-8, and they're a game behind the Nets. Do you like? It's got to like I see so many teams below them right now that are just there's no way they don't get leapfrogged by Miami, by Chicago potentially, by Orlando potentially. And I know Orlando's facing injuries, but at the same time, like they were a playoff team last year.
Yeah, but the Knicks have definitely gotten better, and I do like some of their pieces there.
Here's the thing. I do expect at some point in the nearer future, sooner rather than later, the Knicks to make the playoffs under Tibbs. I'm just not sure it's this year. I'm not sure you can turn around what was objectively the worst roster in the NBA last year and make like a few tweaks to it. Not like he didn't overhaul the roster. It is a very similar roster to last year. And last year's was easily the worst roster in the entire NBA. I don't know if you can just turn that around to a playoff berth the next season. Like that would be some crazy, like Tibbs might have to get a statue if that happens.
Okay. I don't know about that, but it would be impressive. I don't know how much time we have, so I'm going to skip around topics just a little bit because these are some of the ones that I really want to get to. And I want to talk about this Donovan Mitchell and Shaquille O'Neal situation we have going on here. I'm going to play the tape. It's only like a minute long. So this is the conversation that Shaquille O'Neal and Donovan Mitchell had after the Utah Jazz actually just blew out the Pelicans.
I said tonight that you are one of my favorite players, but you don't have what it takes to get to the next level. I said it on purpose. I want you to hear it. What do you have to say about that?
All right. That's it.
That's it.
That's it?
All right. That's it.
Okay, cool.
I mean,
I want you to hear it.
I've been hearing that since, I'm just going to get up and do what I do.
Good.
At the end of the day.
That's what I want you to hear you say. Love your game, brother. Keep it up.
Appreciate it.
You know, Spider-Wood, our candid conversation, you guys were the top 5 players. You obviously couldn't see you playing the game.
All right. So a little bit of an awkward exchange there between the two of them. I think Shaq was trying to get a response out of him. Didn't exactly get that. What do you make of these little weird exchange we had there?
I don't understand why Shaq like does it. Shaq, the entire Inside the NBA crew is incredibly antagonistic to younger players for some reason. I don't understand why, but it's like I don't really understand what Shaq expected him to say. Like, okay, I just balled out against the Pelicans. Like, I don't know what you want me to do, man. The finals aren't until later this year. Like, I can't do anything. It's like, what do you want from him?
Yeah, so I think actually what you just saw there was a generational gap in that Shaq's generation was very confrontational in that they're like, I'm the greatest, I'm the best. And then our generation is very much like, all right, dude, like you don't have to come at me like that. Like I'm just out here balling.
To yourself, kind of like the newer generation more so want to be able to prove it to themselves that they can do that kind of stuff, and less so externally to people who, their obligations are far more focused. I feel like. There are obviously players who are on the fringe of that and don't really who are still remnant of the older guard. But it's just like, I just don't really know what Shaq expected him to say.
I think he wanted him to say that, like, to basically snap back at him and be like, don't talk to me like that. You know I'm the best player on the court. I think that's when he wanted to get out of him. Because I think Donovan Mitchell isn't exactly a very vocal leader. So I think he was a call to him to be like, hey, look, I just called you out. Call me back out. Say I'm a liar. And you just didn't get that out of him. So unfortunately, Shaq's little plan kind of blew up in his face a little bit.
Okay, if you're gonna play if you're gonna try and be an anime mentor to a guy, make sure he's kind of prepared for it. That's how Vegeta talks to his kid. That's how Vegeta talks to Trunks in Dragon Ball.
Very much.
I'm not sure that Shaq and Donovan Mitchell are close like that. So why is Shaq talking to Donovan Mitchell like he understands the nuances of how he acts and how he gives advice and stuff? So it was just kind of strange just to be like, okay. He just finished playing a game. He's just like, how did you? What was your preparation like tonight, or something like? Ask a normal question, Shaq. Why be weird?
Yeah, the TNT show is really the NBA after dark. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Dude, or Shaq, you can if you want to give Donovan Mitchell some motivation, if he's one of your favorite players in the league right now, and you're trying to motivate him to be greater, you can reach out to him personally. You're Shaq. He will reply to you. You are one of the greatest players in history. He's going to reply to you if you have advice for him.
Right. So I thought that was definitely worth highlighting. It was very goofy.
It was funny. It was definitely funny because it was just a very strange interaction.
Yeah.
To be that heatedly awkward.
Yeah. So, and I would like to thank Christian Wynn for checking in. Chris Wynn on Twitter says Donovan Mitchell is the Dominique Wilkins of the millennial NBA generation. I can't help but agree with you there. So I also want to get to another weird NBA little situation we got going on here. That's Kevin Porter Jr. I don't know if you've read about this. He ended up getting traded from the Cavs to the Rockets. So apparently when they traded for Taurean Prince and Allen, they moved his locker and gave it to Prince. So he took it quite personally, obviously, but it turned out he had yet to be with the team all season long. And in case anyone wants to know why he wasn't with the team, it was not injury. I can assure you that. The USC product hasn't played this season due to personal reasons. He was arrested in November after crashing his vehicle on an interstate highway near Cleveland. He was charged with improper handling of a firearm in a motor vehicle, marijuana possession, and driving without a license. Though his lawyer said in December that those charges were dropped. Is Kevin Porter Jr. in the right or wrong by getting upset that they moved his locker without his say?
Dude, Kevin Porter Jr. needs to stop worrying about his locker, and he needs to worry about how to get off of 5 stars on GTA. Dude, what is that rap? Dude, he was just driving around Los Santos trying to get into trouble. What was Kevin Porter Jr. up to during the offseason? It was COVID, dude. You weren't just in your house. Why were you driving without a license and handling firearms?
I don't know. But let's say that didn't happen. Let's say he was gone because of personal reasons and he comes back and he sees that his locker was moved that he had, I guess, all season long last year. Is that enough to be upset about? Is there any legitimacy to that?
The annals of Cleveland Cavaliers history do not smile very brightly upon Kevin Porter Jr. So I don't understand why he thinks he has standing within this hallowed organization to be able to throw a fit. Apparently, being visibly upset. That's the report, right? That he had a huge kind of temper tantrum upon learning that his locker was moved. So, why does Kevin Porter Jr. think he is in the standing to do that? I just don't think I don't think he has the same level of tightness on his grip on reality as the rest of us do.
Yeah, a lot of it, I think, comes from him being a young kid and obviously not the smartest human being on the planet. It's probably safe to say that. So it's probably a little bit of a part of it. He's got a lot of pride. And I guess that's the good takeaway from all of this is that he takes a lot of honor in the way he plays in the game and he has a lot of respect for it. And he just felt in that case that he was disrespected. That's the nice way of putting it. And that's the way I'll put it for the Delivering Sports show. That's fine.
Where did he get traded?
He went to Houston for a protected second rounder for basically nothing. So just
Kevin Porter Jr. in Houston.
He will have time to play in Houston. They're obviously going through a few struggles. We'll see if he can kind of get it together, but he's got to get rid of that yee haircut, we'll say, for radio purposes. You saw it right here. When I was editing this and I made the graphic for it and I was doing his hair, I was I was chiseling out the background, obviously. And his hair just kept going up and I'm like, I had to put the brightness on my computer. I'm like, is his hair really that large? And I kept going up and
haircut.
That's why he probably had such a bad luck in his life. I don't know, but we have just a few more minutes here. I just want to quickly go over these NFL games. Of course, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers look to face Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. I think this line's 3.5. Where do you fall in this legendary matchup here? This is the one that we've been wanting to see forever.
We got Packers -3.5.
That's correct.
I don't know. It really is kind of like a spin the wheel on what kind of Tampa Bay Buccaneers team you're gonna get on a week-to-week basis. Sometimes they're gonna play so fast and quick and effective that a team like they did against the first time they played the Packers. They socked them in the mouth right out of the gate, and the Packers couldn't catch up. But there have also been plenty of games this season where the Bucs have played down to their competition in a sense, in that like games are they don't fire, like their offense isn't firing the way it's supposed to, and they're struggling to put points up against teams, and even their defense, especially in those kinds of games, has been susceptible to some pretty big lapses that created some big plays over the course of the season. So I think I do like 3.5 for the Packers, even if they I do think I like 3.5 for the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, sorry about that. The thing for me is like, tell me why the Packers are going to lose. Like, I know they got blown out earlier, but we're not talking about early in the season. The Packers legitimately don't look like they have a weakness. And the other thing that I really like about them is that they're a pass-heavy team. We all knew that. And then they go and face the Rams, and they're like, we're just going to run the ball 10 times to 6 runs. Straight up. They just don't care. They're willing to make a game plan that works for them. And now that they do have game tape on the Buccaneers and a very large array of it, I think they'll be much more prepared. I don't think this is going to be a blowout necessarily, but I do think the Packers definitely have the edge. And Aaron Rodgers, man, just has that soulless look in his eyes, and he's looking to make it to the Super Bowl finally.
Ignite the spark within his heart, man.
He's hoping the Lombardi Trophy will give him like a Space Jam level spark back into his body. Like in his mind, I think the ball, like from Space Jam, is the Lombardi Trophy, and he's looking to get his powers back or his spark for life. I think the Lombardi Trophy was supposed to take his ability to play football, but instead it took his soul on accident.
So it was just like a
malfunction when it comes to the Space Jam object here.
The thing with the Packers is that they have earlier on in the season, it's easier to discount those games while they are still significant, but it's easier to discount them when they're earlier on in the season, which was the blowout that they faced at the hands of the Bucs. But since then, I feel like they have settled into their own kind of identity, and no team that they have played pretty much since then has been able to kind of pressure them enough to the point where they kind of play outside of exactly how they planned on playing in any given day. And I'm not sure the Bucs have the playmakers on the defensive end of the ball right now that can do that at this point in the season.
Yeah, but I'm just going to say, if Tom Brady does win and he goes to Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, and Pat Mahomes to win a Lombardi Trophy, that's it.
We can't
there's no discussion. It's it. That's it. He ended the conversation in one season.
There's no discussion to be had. If Brady does do this and he pulls it off, and God forbid he even wins the Super Bowl, there's no discussion to be had. We have to, unfortunately, in the Hall of Fame career of Patrick Mahomes, we have to dead any of the GOAT talk.
That's it.
Brady will solidify it if he pulls off this run.
I have to agree. So we have about 30 seconds here. We'll basically just ask you where you think this is going to run here. 1.5 point spread. I like the Chiefs. I just can't bet against them, but I think the Bills have a legitimate chance to win this game.
1.5.
I think it's 1.5.
I'd take that and more, honestly. I would. I don't think it's going to be as close as everyone thinks.
Yeah, I don't know, but the Bills have give me a reason why the Bills can't be in this game. The Chiefs' defense stinks. They don't have, at the very least, the Chiefs don't have the same moniker as last season.
That's true. Yeah, their defense caught fire towards the end of the year, and that was kind of what was able to allow them to win the Super Bowl. But when it comes down to the head-to-head to me, dude. Is Josh Allen going to outplay Patrick Mahomes? I don't. So that's why I like a -1 for just 1.5. I like to choose.
Yeah. All right. Well, we ran out of time. I had about an hour left to show. I didn't even realize. I'm so bad at making these show logs. I always have so much I want to talk about. But thanks for coming on, Kevin. I'm playing a little Papa Roach from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 to end the show here. But thanks for joining, man.
Appreciate you having me on, my brother. Good luck to you and all of your future success with everything.
I'm gonna see you later tonight, but okay. All right, guys. We'll catch you next time.
The world famous radio shopping show weekdays on 1400 KSHP North Las Vegas.